Good afternoon to one and all, and welcome to another afternoon live at the Waterhole here with Africam and Wild Earth TV. My name is Liam Burrow, and I am the very fortunate naturalist that gets to chat you through a couple of these water science scenes as we have a look at a couple of very varied African locations over the next 2 hours or so. A very interesting scene from Comfers Dam here in Kimberley. But before we do get too carried away with all of that, I'd love to remind you that we do try and keep these shows as interactive as possible. So please keep your questions, comments, thoughts coming to us throughout the show. Myself and Director Chulu are certainly standing by waiting to hear from you. So as I say though, certainly quite an interesting scene here from Comfers Dam in the Kimberley region of South Africa. We are of course visiting our very well-known flamingo colony, a colony of greater and lesser flamingos. But those slightly unusual looking mammals in the background are a herd of red hartebeest. Now those are not something we see a whole lot of, although they do occur in one or two of our other locations. So a very nice opportunity to see them. Now there are reckoned to only be something like 130,000 of these red hartebeest in all of South Africa. So that makes them very special indeed. Quite a close relative of the sesame, another slightly similar antelope species, which actually holds the title as the fastest antelope in Africa, at speeds of something like 55 kilometers an hour. Historically these red hartebeest would have been much more widely distributed across southern Africa. Original reports by some of the earliest explorers said that these guys were found as far south as Cape Town. However, with the way human development has happened in Africa over the last couple of centuries, that range is greatly reduced today. I actually wasn't even aware that these guys were in this little sanctuary here at Comfers Dam. I know that there are some springbok and a few other things around here, but wonderful to have them here as well. Anyway, while we soak things up here at Comfers Dam, I think it is time to check in to see what's in store for us in terms of the weather. And by the looks of it, we may have even missed a little bit of mating there on the left. That is, after all, a very good thing. These guys having a bit of a reduced population and all, the more the merrier. And as always, nice to get a good view of a couple of these flamingos going about their business as well. Certainly not the busiest time of year for this flamingo colony. We can expect to see absolute thousands of them at a time when they do breed more towards the height of the wet season. Hello, Joe McClellan. Joe McClellan says 43 degrees here in North Indiana. I'm presuming that's Fahrenheit. Yeah, that sounds pretty chilly, Joe. But yeah, as I say, many thousands of these flamingos will visit Comfort's Dam when they are breeding, more towards November, December. Oh, there's that mating again. January, February. And that makes this a pretty critical place for these flamingos, which after all are a fairly threatened pair of species, the greater and the lesser flamingo. These red hartebeests are peculiar looking things though. Goodness me. And he's at it again. Yeah, certainly for a lot of our antelope species, rutting and mating does occur when conditions are a bit drier. Oh, and one more time. And that usually works pretty perfectly to time the arrival of either calves or lambs with the onset of the wet season, more towards the end of the year. Obviously, the presence of high quality grazing, high quality vegetation for those cows is pretty critical for the production of high quality milk. Leah asks, do they mate for days at a time? Leah, probably not. I think the window in which a female, and certainly females of many antelope species, actually have to kind of ovulate and have an egg fertilized is usually quite small. So you'll probably find the fertilization of that egg will happen in a couple of hours. But yeah, that bull, having sensed elevated levels of estrogen in this cow's urine, will be very keen to get the job done and make sure no competing bulls have the chance. Very nice. I think that's an African black duck too, swimming past. Nice to see a bit of a variety in the waterbird species. Molly R asks, do both the males and females have horns? Molly R, they absolutely do. We are looking at a male and a female mating right now. So the bull has the larger, thicker set of horns, and the cow a slightly skinnier set. Yeah, for many of our other antelope species, we expect a degree of sexual dimorphism, so a very visual difference between males and females. And in the case of things like impala, nyala, kudu, certainly a couple more things like that. The bulls have the horns, the cows do not. But yeah, the opposite is also true for these guys, for things like roan antelope, sable antelope, eland, and of course the springbok that we took a look at yesterday. Yeah, amongst those species, oh, there he goes yet again. Both males and females have got horns. Yeah, it seems to be pretty beneficial for some female antelope to have horns, though they don't fight one another for dominance. When it comes to defending a newborn calf or a newborn lamb from things like jackals, and certainly even lesser carnivores, things like cheetahs. And yeah, those horns are useful things. Yeah, and it's perhaps a little bit obscured by these dead bushes. There he goes, mating one more time there. That's got to be 6 or 7 times already. It's a little bit obscured by these bushes, but you can actually see occasionally there a number of last year's calves. Um, so this herd has obviously been quite successful. It seems to be growing rapidly. Yeah, they are quite an unusual sight. I've been lucky enough to view them a number of times at Tswalu in the Kalahari, in the safaris that I've operated there. Yeah, certainly they are absolutely bizarre. Very interesting things to see in person. Joe McClellan says, Happy Mother's Day to all moms, human and animal. Definitely, Joan, Happy Mother's Day to you and to all the mothers out there in, I think, the UK and South Africa, for whom it is Mother's Day today. Yeah, so you can see a number of those calves mixed into the middle there. They're the ones with the horns short and straight, that point straight upwards. My apologies, I think it is the US and the UK, or rather the US and South Africa today. And yeah, so now the monitor that I am viewing the picture on is not as detailed as yours on kind of the broadcast end, but there are a number of other waterbird species here. As I say, a little bit tricky for me to try and identify a lot of the smaller, more drab waterbird species there, but perhaps a couple of yellow-billed teals swimming amongst those flamingos. Yeah, as I say, they're pretty tricky. On land here, we've certainly got a number of spur-winged geese. They are the very largest of those large goose-shaped birds on the bank. And certainly mixed in amongst them are a number of Egyptian geese as well. They're quite a well-established population of them. They're a very dominant waterbird species, that Egyptian goose. And I've actually seen them in London as well, where I believe they've been artificially introduced. They are an alien invasive species. Yeah, they can be bullies to some degree with slightly smaller waterbird species. So they're not really ideal to have in an area where they don't belong. They tend to outcompete smaller ducks. Yeah, if memory serves, I think they were actually introduced to the UK for the nobility up there to hunt them for food. But yeah, as these things very often go, the geese have got a bit out of control up there. And of course, the ever-present flamingos doing a bit of wading and feeding there. That may have been a little grebe as well that's just gone diving into the water behind them. I think there's two. So yeah, certainly some variety amongst the birds this afternoon. Alrighty, well, in the interest of keeping things flowing, let's head now up to the Olifants River in the Olifants West Private Game Reserve in Limpopo. Magnificent. So we've got what looks like a reasonably sized Nile crocodile doing a bit of basking up on a nice sandbank here on the Olifants River. Now this location is just outside the little bush town of Hoedspruit in South Africa's Limpopo province. So this is very much my neck of the woods. And I actually spent 3 of the very earliest years of my guiding career in this reserve. Yeah, notice how dark this crocodile's skin actually is. Crocodiles and a whole host of other reptile species have what we call photosensitive skin cells. So photo referring to light. When the crocodile's body temperature is very low, the skin actually darkens, which obviously has a number of benefits in terms of improving how effective that skin is at absorbing light and heat. And then as that crocodile warms up nicely in the sun, he is, after all, an ectothermic animal, a cold-blooded animal. As he warms up, the skin turns to more of a yellowish, greenish kind of hue. So yeah, I would say this guy is quite chilly. And looking at the light in this frame, it looks pretty overcast here on the Olifants. Molly R asks, what's your favorite species of animal? Molly, it's very, very tricky to pick a favorite. I'm so passionate about so many different things. But I would have to say probably the elephant. Yeah, I love spending hours at a time doing ellies. And I think the thing for me is that elephant activity never really stops. As magnificent as something like a lion or a leopard is, although we do get very excited when we are lucky enough to see one, lions and leopards spend up to 80% of their lives asleep. An elephant, by contrast, is up on its feet moving around for 80 to 90% of its life. Yeah, it makes them fascinating to watch. Joan Mello says, wow, a good-sized croc, good find. Certainly, Joan. Yeah, I can't take credit for that one. I think this one was spotted by Chulu, the director. So thanks very much to Chulu for directing us here. Always nice to get a good look at a crocodile. And now I don't think this guy is massive. He's probably in the region of about 2 meters, 6 foot. But as an ex-boss of mine used to say, it's still big enough to ruin your day if it was to grab you by the foot. Certainly this is still a very powerful and potentially quite dangerous animal. Now, a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, the Olifants River had a biological disaster in terms of its crocodile population. Very suddenly, crocodiles in quite large numbers were washing up on the banks of this river, completely dead. And it was a bit of a mystery for a very long time as to what was causing this. The investigations and post-mortems conducted by state vets in the area revealed that these crocodiles were suffering from some sort of muscular disorder that was quite literally paralyzing them. They're perfectly healthy, happy individuals. They were suddenly becoming paralyzed, losing the ability to swim, and many of them were drowning. And it was only when investigations were conducted further that it was found that a mine further north in the town of Palabora was leaching some sort of chemical through its efforts to mine whatever they were mining into the river, and whatever these toxins were poisoning the crocodiles. So that was certainly pretty devastating. Thankfully, they managed to catch it, put a stop to it, and the crocs slowly started to recover. Then, in a bit of a bizarre twist of fate, we had a massive flood in, I think it was 2012, 2013, and the Olifants River's banks broke and overflowed, flooding a local crocodile farm, after which a couple of thousand crocodiles were lost from there into the river. It's almost like nature took a few back. And today the crocodile population of the Olifants River is looking very good. Joan Mello says, if it's 6 foot, it's bigger than me. Yeah, truth, Joan. As I say, it could certainly still do some damage if it grabs you by the hand or the foot. So the river is a little bit lower than we may expect it to be in the height of the summer, the height of the rainy season. But the beautiful thing about this Olifants River is it's basically always flowing. So it brings a source of water, and in doing so, a source of life into this entire wilderness area as it passes through Olifants West Game Reserve and then further into the actual deep Kruger National Park. And then from there it crosses into neighboring Mozambique to the east. They are a very important source of water and source of life for a whole lot of wild species along the way. It is really a magnificent part of the world. These large sycamore fig trees that line the riverbank also provide a home for a critically endangered population of Pell's fishing owls, a very, very rare species of which they reckon there are possibly fewer than 60 pairs living in all of South Africa, so less than 120 birds. I had a sighting in a fig tree here along the Olifants River of 3 of them, 2 parents and a chick. It's a very, very, very special part of the world. A wonderful opportunity to look at those scaly scutes that run down that crocodile's neck, back and tail. Certainly looks like a dinosaur. Now those projections or protuberances down that crocodile's back might appear to be scales, and certainly when it does hatch out of its egg at less than a foot long, they are. So they're kind of cartilaginous. But as that crocodile matures, those scaly scutes actually ossify. They gradually transition from cartilage to bone. And I shared a picture to social media a couple of days back of those scutes that have all been removed from a dead crocodile, or rather those osteoderms, and they form this most magnificent kind of bony shield down that crocodile's back, its legs, even its sides. Almost certainly beefed up protection from the horns and hooves of the animals it feeds on, as well as the biting jaws of other competing crocodiles. Yeah, they're a pretty winning design, but they have been here for 200 million years, so they've certainly had time to perfect it. Molly R says, the elephants are one of my favorites too. Used to love seeing them at the Addo Elephant National Park as a child. Thanks for sharing, Molly R. Yeah, well, I've never been to Addo myself. I've heard it's a beautiful part of the world. It's certainly nice to see elephants in that fairly arid landscape. Yeah, certainly lots of elephants down here around the Olifants West area as well, as the name suggests. Very good conditions for ellies. Marcus asks, do crocodiles tolerate other species in the water? How territorial are they? Good afternoon there, Marcus. Nice to have you on board. So crocs are, I guess, reasonably tolerant of other crocodiles in the area, provided they're not breeding. But certainly adult male crocodiles, when it comes to defending the rights to mate along a certain stretch of river or in a sort of a big water hole, can be very volatile to other males. And fights between them can occasionally be fatal. And if not fatal, in the very least, they often lose appendages, they have their entire tails ripped off. So yeah, it can be a pretty brutal world. When it comes to dealing with other species, though, I would say they're probably not tolerant. I think it's pretty beneficial for a crocodile to have other species in the water from a predation perspective. Crocs, after all, feed on a whole host of other species in the water, from terrapins to fish to things like otters, even possibly a baby hippo if they can get a hold of one. Yeah, I guess the finest example of coexistence between crocs and another species is the crocodile and the hippopotamus, which we do often see together, sharing these water courses, but it's a bit of a fragile coexistence. So I think they try and stay out of each other's way most of the time. Obviously, a fully mature hippo bull with jaws that open to over 160 degrees and gigantic beer bottle-sized tusks that self-sharpen. Now that hippo has the ability to take about a 4 meter or 12 foot Nile crocodile and bite it into two fairly neat pieces. On the other side of that coin, a 4 meter crocodile could probably very easily catch and kill a little newborn hippo. So again, I think it's fairly beneficial that they give each other some room. And yeah, under most normal circumstances, they do. Doreen asks, what's the biggest prey you've seen a crocodile take down? Doreen, I've witnessed a couple of crocodile kills. It's generally been smaller stuff though. I've seen crocs catching nyala, impala, and then of course much more commonly seen them fishing on multiple occasions. but working as a conservation pilot, flying a little airplane in the Limpopo National Park. Actually, funnily enough, still on this Olifants River, but over in Mozambique. I witnessed crocodiles on a very fresh adult cat buffalo kill. Certainly the biggest of those crocodiles was well over 5 meters long. So yeah, a very, very impressive sight. But yeah, certainly not water you would want to be swimming in. And that stretch that I flew along for a time doing a bit of conservation boasted, I think, one of the largest crocodile populations possibly in the entire Greater Transfrontier area. Yeah, it always curled my toes a little bit with anxiety flying through the Olifants Gorge on my daily conservation patrols there. Should your airplane's engine fail and you've got to land in water like that, now that's just about the worst thing I can think of. Having to try and outswim animals that are biologically engineered to outperform you, and certainly animals that are willing to hunt, kill and eat humans. Definitely not good. Yeah, crocs will also very regularly nest on sandbanks, just like the one we're looking at in front of us here. So this is a pretty prime Nile crocodile nesting location. At this size, about 2 meters long, this could well be a reproductively mature female. So there's a possibility that when the rains come around again, closer to October, November, towards the end of the year, she could be up here again, digging a nest and laying some eggs. Yeah, the nests are fairly shallow, generally reasonably close to the water's edge, 10 or 15 meters away. And she'll dig about 60 centimeters into some nice damp sand and deposit anywhere between as few as 8 and perhaps as many as 60 or 70 fairly hard-shelled eggs into that sand. And then the eggs incubate for about 90 days, 3 months, based on the temperatures, or the average temperatures in the area. And then once they hatch, they make this little kind of croaking, squeaking, almost frog-type noise. The female, which waits nearby, they will hear that noise. She comes up onto land, digs the nest open, and then with the same jaws that she uses to crush the bodies of the animals she feeds on, she gently rolls the unhatched eggs between her teeth, frees those little youngsters and carries them gently down to the water in her mouth. So perhaps a slightly softer side that we don't realize is there to an animal that is otherwise thought of as quite a cold-blooded killer. They are, after all, one of the very, very few reptiles that actually looks after their nest and takes care of their young for a number of weeks after they've hatched. Yeah, and quite fascinatingly, the eggs are also temperature sex dependent. So the temperature of incubation determines the gender of the hatchlings, the little neonates. So I think the rule is cool for males. So cooler temperatures produce males, hotter temperatures produce females. And the opposite is true of turtles and tortoises. And yeah, she tends to lay the eggs in layers. So the usual rule is that you should get cooler temperatures in the lower half of the nest, warmer temperatures in the half of the nest that is closer to the surface. So we should get a nice balance of brothers and sisters in that nest. But a bit of a spanner is being thrown into the works in areas where global warming and climate change has raised the temperature by 2 or 3 degrees, and you are getting an entire generation of whatever it is, either crocodiles, alligators, gharials, emerging as one gender, which is going to create a bit of a reproductive disaster when it comes time for those animals to breed. Alrighty, well, I think it might be time to let sleeping crocodiles lie and to head over now to something completely different up at Okakoyo in Etosha, Namibia. Ha ha ha, brilliant. So we spent quite a bit of time here at Okakoyo yesterday, and I remarked a couple of times that we haven't really been seeing our desert-adapted elephants. And there we go, ask and you shall receive, I guess. This looks like a very large bull elephant. And once again, these are desert-adapted ellies, so that's quite a special thing to see. There are reckoned to be fewer than 2,000 individuals in all of Etosha. Beautiful. Now, this big bull is genetically indistinct from the savanna elephants that we see across our other locations, up at Oldonyo and in places like Djuma. They are the same. They're both savanna elephants biologically. But in terms of its habits, this elephant is far more better adapted at a life in this arid and quite harsh place. Yeah, some groups of these elephants in these areas will be walking 125 miles in a round trip every single day just to get water. Obviously, ellies in the wetter parts of southern Africa, places like the Kruger, have a much more easy go of things. And as a result of their fairly harsh life, it's reckoned that that's probably the most direct reason why these elephants here in Etosha don't really develop such large tusks. They probably don't get the minerals that they need to build those big teeth. But from the perspective, once again, of ivory poaching, it's probably a fairly good thing that their ivory is fairly small. And as a result, there doesn't seem to be much threat of elephant poaching in the area at this stage. Touch wood. A stark contrast from other parts of Africa, where an elephant is potentially shot every 15 minutes illegally for those very silly ivory tusks. Now, on one of these hopefully daily visits to the waterhole, a big desert-adapted elephant bull such as this could arguably be drinking as much as 200 liters of water, and obviously carrying that off internally with him. But quite fascinatingly, all elephants also have something called a pharyngeal pouch. So it's a pouch kind of around their larynx, that they actually have the ability to fill with about 5 liters of water. So a fairly significant amount. And that pouch of water acts as an emergency reserve. So should that elephant not be able to get back to water in time, that that pharyngeal pouch gives an element of endurance. And it's amazing, if you ever view elephants up close and they're extremely upset or very, very excited for whatever reason, I think a bit of a reflex is that they empty that pharyngeal pouch. I missed an elephant birth in the Olifants West Game Reserve by probably about 5 minutes, and kind of came around a corner to the screaming and trumpeting of a bunch of cows very excitedly. And when we stopped with them, watching this baby kind of stretch its legs for the first time, and many of these cows were dripping this water from their mouths. Yeah, fascinating beasts, Elise. Now, you might be thinking it's perhaps slightly unusual to be seeing an elephant all on its own, and certainly if this was a female, that would be true. But the bulls tend to have a slightly looser social structure. While they do form bachelor herds, and bonds between males seem to be quite strong, and they do occasionally separate and go off on their own missions. Keeping in mind as well, elephants have the ability to communicate with one another at frequencies way below the range humans can hear, over distances of possibly 35 kilometers at least, quite possibly more. So even though he's stood here alone, it's well within the realm of possibility that he's chatting to other male members of his social group far out of sight across this landscape. It's an elephant social method. Lorraine asks, why do these creatures sleep standing? Which other animals do this? So Lorraine, elephants do occasionally take a nap on their feet, but of course they do have the ability to sleep lying down as well. I think the reason for standing on their feet and taking a bit of a nap is it's quite an efficient way of doing that. It also then places them in a less vulnerable position. An elephant all on its own, lying flat on its side, fast asleep, would theoretically be vulnerable to bites from hyenas, maybe an attack from a pride of lions if it's small enough. So also something to keep in mind is that elephants probably only spend about an hour of their entire day out of the 24-hour cycle actually resting. So much of their sleep is broken into very, very short little power naps, 5 or 6 minutes at a time. Maybe only actually lying down flat once every couple of days. And in terms of other animals that sleep standing up, I guess, maybe things like zebra, a couple of the antelope will also have a bit of a nap on their feet. But the vast majority of things, when it comes to proper deep sleep, will lie down. It's certainly a bit tricky to give you an idea of the scale of this animal, but he is an immense elephant bull, probably in the region of about 6 or 7 tons. The largest, or rather the heaviest ever elephant supposedly came from Namibia, and that entry said that elephant bull was something like 11 tons in weight, and the entry was made like 150 years ago though, so I have a feeling that was fairly inaccurate. But certainly these desert elephants are some of the biggest ones out there. I reckon bulls could quite realistically get up to about 8 tons, perhaps a smidge more. Real Greens asks, how are prey animals aware of the threat that crocodiles pose if they haven't witnessed a crocodile attack? Real Greens, I think a lot of these things come down to instinct. So, yeah, instincts, I think in a lot of cases, are things that human beings have just kind of lost. Our lives in the greater scheme of things, with us not really having to worry about things like predators in our day-to-day lives. Those senses for us have got weaker and weaker generation to generation. But yeah, things like animals seem to have a hard-coded genetic sense for danger. And of course, the point is driven home if they do see one of their family members getting munched, as often of them do, or some of them do. Molly R says, how amazing. As the females roam together and the men travel alone, do they ever get lonely? So, Molly, this guy might be traveling on his own for the moment, but elephant males have a well-developed social structure. So he is almost certainly bonded to a group of other adult bulls. So he is by no means a lonely animal. I guess things are a little bit different out here in Etosha, though, with reduced elephant densities. Even though there are around 2,000 elephants here, they are spread over an absolutely enormous area. So, yeah, I guess the gaps between them are a bit bigger. This Etosha area is 8,600 square kilometers, which is about 2.2 million hectares. So it is about the same size as the Greater Kruger in South Africa's Lowveld region, but where the Greater Kruger is home to around 20,000 elephants. This area only has about 10% of that. So yeah, certainly some big gaps between the herds, I'd say. Victor asks, how will this elephant find the rest of the herd again? Victor, it comes down once again to that communication. So elephants are able to transmit sounds at frequencies way below and, of course, way above the human range of hearing. And especially those low-frequency communications, those can travel at least 35 kilometers, quite possibly more. I thought the picture had frozen there, but he was just stood very, very still. Yeah, many scientists theorize at a time before sort of the modern human age in Africa, this ability of elephants to communicate would have established a vast elephant social network that spread literally north to south across the entire continent, with herds of elephants arguably passing information about danger, periods of drought in certain areas, the locations of good grazing. Incredible to think of elephants migrating between these southernmost populations and their furthest northern reaches over literally years at a time. And those migrations today, of course, are no longer possible. There are just too many people and too many obstacles in the way. Hence the reason to conserve and protect these areas, the last strongholds of these magnificent pachyderms. Diane in the UK says he seems to have a very long trunk. Do they vary in length much? It does seem to be quite a long trunk, Diane, and I was actually just thinking he's actually got quite a short tail, as elephants go. So yeah, I have no doubt there is a little bit of variation from individual to individual, I guess, just like you and me. Some get a big nose, some get little ears. I guess to some degree that would come down to the individual and its genetic phenotype, the physical expression of its characteristics. I commented yesterday, though, what a tricky place this must be for an animal as large as an elephant to actually find enough food. Obviously, we know from spending time with our savanna elephants elsewhere that an adult elephant bull, a full, well-developed, massive 6 or 7 tonner, is consuming about a quarter ton, so over 500 pounds of vegetation each day. And that tends to be 500 pounds of fairly high quality stuff. So that must be super tricky for him to have his needs met in this arid, dry place. But they obviously manage. Catherine says, yay, there is life in Okakoyo. Absolutely, Catherine. Yeah, this Okakoyo waterhole is a pretty wonderful indicator of the presence of the megafauna in the area. And we do see kind of a condensed look at the various forms of life around here. Often huge herds of zebra, springbok, wildebeest, gemsbok or oryx, giraffes, these ellies. So there's loads of life in terms of the big species out here, and quite arguably even more in terms of the small stuff. Couple of zebra and springbok in the background there. It does look like this elephant bull may move off. We'll see. They excuse me, do tend to linger around the water's edge. I guess if you've got to do over 100 miles of walking to get here, you're going to want to take your time. But yeah, he is moving off by the looks of things. Incredible to see that big grey body against the background of that white calcrete rock. Very chalky desert stone. Yeah, if it wasn't for the trees and I guess the animals, this place would look like the surface of another planet. It's all a bit bizarre and otherworldly. But yeah, as we've seen, life flourishes even here. And once again, a couple of springbok emerging there in kind of the bottom of the frame. Now another very well adapted desert resident. Happily nibbling away at some very meager grazing there. And a bit of movement from a couple of plains zebra as well on the opposite side, coming down to have their turn at the water's edge as well. We are fast approaching the hottest period that occurs in an African afternoon, and that happens at about 2 p.m. So we should see a fairly steady stream of thirsty drinkers emerging from this arid landscape as we go. They certainly are quite weary looking as they cross that Kalk Creek area and come down for some refreshment. Darkman Lover says, Wild Earth Africam and Liam, good afternoon, great to be here. Thank you for this fantastic live at the Waterholes show. Love nature and learning about all wildlife. Hello Darkman Lover, nice to have you on board as well. And yeah, certainly stick around. Hopefully we can check out a couple of other locations and in the portfolio as the afternoon unfolds. Our variety is, after all, the spice of life, if the technological side of things will play ball for us. Yeah, we've certainly experienced a couple of technical difficulties in a lot of our shows lately, as is often the case with these feeds, coming live from such remote regions. Often based on an internet connection. That makes me wonder, I wonder if it's not something to do with that big aurora that occurred in both the northern and southern hemisphere in recent days. It could well have been some satellite interference there. So yeah, now that that has seemed to pass, I wonder if it won't improve. It's interesting to look at the stripes on these plains zebra and to note that they are much skinnier. Certainly the dark stripes, the black stripes, certainly much skinnier than those of the plains zebras that we see in many of our other slightly cooler regions. I wonder if there's not a thermal benefit to having less black there. Black as a color, after all, absorbs a lot more heat and light. So yeah, possibly a slight improvement on their thermal efficiency by reducing that black over time. Yeah, also one lone gemsbok, one lone southern oryx coming out of the scrub there. A magnificent desert wanderer. And also in a lot of the locations in which those oryx actually live, they can live entirely independent of water if they have to. A very impressive feat in these temperatures. Obviously, if you or I were to find ourselves in a landscape like this without access to water, if we were in the shade, we might be able to last 2 or 3 days, but in the sun, probably less than a day without a drink. So yeah, for me at least, certainly the fact that these animals can go so long without water at their size blows my mind a little bit. And the nice blue wildebeest there, as well as what I think is a little grebe, that waterbird swimming around in the water. Darkmane Lover says, I love gemsbok. Yeah, certainly. They are absolutely magnificent antelope. I like those black and white markings on the face. There are a number of different oryx species that do occur in Africa. We obviously only get the southern oryx this far south, but go up to a place like Oldonyo and you might find the bisa, or the fringe-eared oryx. And then heading even further north into the Sahara, you get things like addax, very critically endangered antelope species. But yeah, many of them share similarities like those face markings, almost that bandit mask. And that that must be due to some sort of benefit with regards to thermoregulation, or perhaps even the management of the amount of light coming into their eyes, provided by the different colors of fur on the face. A bit like those malar stripes once again on the face of a cheetah. Darkmane Lover asks, Liam, why are the gemsbok known as the oryx? The antelope has 2 names. Which one name will be the most fitting? So Darkmane Lover, I believe gemsbok is Afrikaans. So I think that would have just been the result of kind of Afrikaans settlers, possibly even being some of the first Westerners down this far south to see these guys and to kind of send specimens back to the Western world. But certainly across the rest of the range in the English language, we refer to these animals which occur in Africa and Asia as oryx. So I would say scientifically, oryx is probably the most appropriate. But I guess 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They're both appropriate names. Loads of zebra emerging now, almost out of nowhere. No, I've never personally had a sighting of the desert lions, which I believe are occasionally seen here around the waterhole at Okakoyo here. But as far as I can see, this would be the perfect place for a pride of lions to hang out, with all of these grazers coming in. So you never know, maybe we'll be lucky one of these days and spot some lions or a cheetah, or I guess a brown hyena or a leopard. They all occur here. Now this group is a little bit too large to be a single herd of plains zebra, and their family structure is usually based around a lead female known as a pathfinder, one adult stallion, probably 3 or 4 other females and their foals. So a group as big as this must be about 30 individuals, possibly even more. This is likely to be 3 or 4 families at least. I guess all on the same mission, trying to get that water essential to their survival, hence them all congregating. But with a bit of a mixing of herds, tempers can flare, and it's well documented that stallions, in the hopes of kind of increasing the size of their harem of females, will actively try and kidnap females from other groups. And yeah, battles between those dominant stallions can be lethal. A well-placed kick is certainly enough to crush an opponent's skull. Diane in the UK asks, how's the flying going, Liam? Diane, very well, thanks. I haven't actually been up to much actual physical flying in recent weeks. I've been once or twice. But the big priority for me at the moment is to try and finish up the theoretical exams. I've done 7 out of 8, so 1 to go. Really hopeful to have it finished in the next couple of weeks, and then the real fun starts. Yeah, looking forward to making a real significant contribution to conservation in Africa using that license. It's certainly been hard enough to get, lots of work, but we'll see how it goes. I'm looking forward to whatever happens. Andrew, the video guy, says those zebra almost blend into the whiteness of the background. They absolutely do. Yeah, you wouldn't think of these striking, fairly dazzling animals as particularly camouflaged as well. But I guess white is the only color that they could blend into. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, these rocks in the background are calcrete, and that word calc refers to chalk. Chalk is calcium carbonate. It's a natural substance reckoned to come from the bodies of long dead sea creatures, quite fascinatingly. So this could hint at the fact that the entire Etosha area was either a lake bed, the bottom of an inland lake, or possibly even the floor of the ocean at a stage. But we're obviously talking many hundreds of millions of years ago. Sandy, who is a new member, says the East African oryx is an endangered species, whereas the gemsbok is not. Yeah, that's also true, Sandy. Thanks for sharing. Gemsbok are quite widespread throughout their range, and you can see them here in Etosha, across the Kalahari, and certainly on a lot of private properties in southern Africa as well. Now, one very small zebra foal in the mix there as well. It's got to be awfully tricky for that mare to find enough food to produce enough milk to keep that foal happy and healthy. Now, a testament to strong mothers out there, and there are lots of strong mothers all over the place. We're certainly thankful for them on Mother's Day. Yeah, I've certainly mentioned it in earlier segments, but the zebra can be awfully vicious with one another, particularly the stallions. And very regularly we see them inflicting horrible wounds on one another in their clashes, in their fights. Occasionally you see them missing ears, missing tails, with big chunks missing from their rumps, their shoulders. And naturalists are very quick to say, oh yeah, that was a zebra that survived an attack by a pride of lions. And sometimes they do. Sometimes that could be right. But I think the vast majority of the time, those wounds are inflicted by members of their own species. Yeah, males will certainly fight tooth and claw to try and hang on to their little harem of females and to protect their own foals. They're under constant pressure from younger, fitter stallions who would try and overthrow them. It can certainly be a bit brutal if an adult stallion with a family is overthrown, if he's driven away. Obviously that new incoming stallion has got no interest in protecting stepchildren. So often, unfortunately, first order of business is to kill all of the previous guy's foals. Very harsh and obviously quite cool for us as humans to see something like that happening. But in the greater scheme of things, he's fighting a race against time to try and get his genetic material into the population. So he wants to free those females up for breeding as soon as possible. And certainly a female that is lactating is not going to be available to mate for a good long while. So yeah, harsh but a very effective strategy. Yeah, and just as quickly as they arrived, everybody has finished up and they're moving out. I guess once again, a lot of these animals have got to cover some pretty serious ground between areas of favorable grazing and sources of water. A trip that many of these mammals have probably got to make at least once a day. Alrighty, now for something completely different, let's head up to the Mpumalanga Highveld to see if anything's happening around Lisbon Falls. So this magnificent scene is coming to you live from Lisbon Falls, which is very close to the town of Graskop in the Mpumalanga Highveld, just kind of moving up into the Drakensberg Mountains. This magnificent waterfall is fed by Lisbon Creek, and it's something like 94 meters tall. So the tallest waterfall in the province of Mpumalanga, which is the same province in which I actually live. A really magnificent sight. The flow is a little bit low, but that's fairly typical for this time of the year. And water seems to pretty much always be cascading over the edge, even though it is a little bit less at this time of the year. And still it is a home for some incredibly special species of animal and bird. It's a brilliant place to find things like the bald ibis, a nice endangered species. And they breed on these very flat rock faces. And you can even see things like marina trogons from a reasonably recent helicopter sightseeing safari I took with guests. I've even seen populations of bushbuck up here. So as we chatted about on yesterday's program, I'm sure the area could quite realistically support a population of leopards. And if there's a food source for them, often they'll be there, even if you don't see them. And then these rivers are certainly full of trout. There's loads of frogs around, freshwater crabs. So there is loads of life out there. But the water is very chilly. There's certainly not comfy temperatures in which to swim. Darkman Lover says, wow, Lisbon Falls is absolutely beautiful. And certainly it is, Darkman Lover. Joan Mello asks, has it ever dried up? Joan, it may very well have. I'm not aware of it ever drying up in the last 20 odd years I've spent in this province. But historically it may have. Sandy says, I imagine this is amazing in person. It absolutely is, Sandy. If you ever do find yourself in these Mpumalanga, or in this Mpumalanga Highveld region, perhaps on a trip down the panorama route through the Blyder Canyon, this is well worth a visit. Certainly an area of outstanding natural beauty. And it's quite well protected by the Mpumalanga Tourism and Parks Board. So there's very little threat of development or anything really damaging this area. Alrighty, I think we might leave this scene here at Lisbon Falls and head once again to Comfers Dam. Oops, sorry about that. I think that was a very quiet cat-eye pan at Naledi. But this is obviously Comfers Dam in the region of Kimberley in South Africa. I think those are wildebeest far in the background with a couple of springbok. But of course, center screen is our large colony of greater and lesser flamingos. They are by no means in their peak numbers. You can see up to 15,000 birds here at the peak of the breeding season. It really is a special place for these flamingos. There are probably only 4 or 5 places on the entire continent of Africa in which they can successfully raise a chick. So all the more reason to have places like this protected. Yeah, and my understanding is that this Comfers Dam wetland is a protected area, part of the corporate social responsibility of one of the local mining groups. We established this wetland artificially in the early 2000s, sometime, with the help of a renowned South African ornithologist. Yeah, in other parts of their range, the habitat for these flamingos is under some amount of threat from human activities, specifically soda ash mining as well as salt mining in places like Lake Natron in East Africa, where many of these flamingos in front of us may have been themselves at a time. So yeah, nice that this area here at Comfers is protected. You have to have a fairly specific set of conditions in terms of the right food available and the right breeding conditions available for these flamingos to have any success at all. So flamingos are filter feeders. They only feed in the water. And it was actually long thought that they fed on a diet almost exclusively made up of small crustaceans in the water. So little tiny brine shrimps and things like that. Microscopic shrimp species. However, scientific, or I suppose improvements in science and closer studies actually revealed that flamingos specialize in feeding on a very limited range of diatoms and blue-green algae. And it is that algae, quite surprisingly, that gives those flamingos their pinkish and in some cases even slightly reddish feathers. Yeah, through their digestive process, the algae actually turns from the greenish color that it is in the water to a very reddish color. And certainly when they regurgitate food for their chicks, the substance that come out actually looks like quite thick coagulated blood. It's a bit bizarre. But it is, of course, the carotenoids, the very red pigments in that substance. And carotenoids are the same pigments that give things like tomatoes their reddish color. those carotenoids give those flamingos the pink pigment in their feathers. I believe in captivity, if flamingos are not given the right amount, their feathers actually bleach quite white. But with the addition of a little bit of a carotenoid supplement, and they get those nice pink feathers once again. And pretty easy to distinguish even at a distance between the greater and the lesser flamingos, even just in terms of size. The greater is obviously the very big one, and the slightly redder, slightly pinker, much smaller one is the lesser. Now there's quite a bit of feather maintenance going on here. It is a full-time job for these flamingos, operating in water which is quite sodic, quite high in terms of its salt and its pH. Many of those chemicals, those substances in the water can be quite destructive to a bird's feathers. So they do need to have regular washes and very regular grooming sessions, preening sessions rather. All birds, to my knowledge, have a preen gland, which if you've ever seen a plucked frozen chicken, it looks like a little pimple just above the tail, and that little gland produces minuscule amounts of a very specialized oil, which conditions the feathers. So in one of these preening sessions, the flamingo tickles that gland with its bill, causing it to secrete that oil, gets a bit of it on the bill, and then it combs it nicely all over the feathers, and that improves waterproofing and keeps them nice and conditioned, nice and aerodynamic, which gives them their very efficient flight characteristics. Yeah, you might not think of them as particularly good flyers. They don't look like a very aerodynamic, very fast, streamlined bird. But they fly huge distances in Africa. Certainly between Comfers Dam and easily as far north as Lake Natron in East Africa, that's many thousands of kilometers. It's got to be at least 5,000 or 6,000 k's. And perhaps most bizarrely of all, their closest connections in terms of other birds that they are related to lie in the families of the pigeons and the doves. Yeah, that I find a little bit mind-boggling. Habitually, they're not like one another at all. Pigeons, of course, feed exclusively on grain, on seeds. So Dina asks a very good question. How do male flamingos display to females? So yeah, a very good question, as I say, Dina. When it comes to breeding, these flamingos arrange themselves in huge flocks. In some areas, many thousands of birds in a single flock at a time. And then when conditions are right and they know that they are all pretty much ready to breed, they begin this like coordinated, quite extraordinary ballet. And I think the ballet is a wonderful opportunity for them to display to the birds around them how healthy, how strong, and how fit they actually are. But yeah, I'm not quite sure how exactly the females pick a specific male amongst a tangle of thousands of other birds. But I guess maybe the differences between individuals are clearer to a female flamingo than they are to you or me. And yeah, then they certainly pair off once they've found the one that they like. A male and female will do a bit of courtship dancing off on their own. Then they select a nice spot, usually amongst the safety of a couple of other thousand pairs doing some breeding. They make a little turret out of the mud, a little kind of raised platform on which they'll lay, I think it's 1 to 2 eggs. But in many cases, it can be a bit of a race against time. The turret is often only a couple of inches off of ground level. So should excessive rainfall fall in any of these areas, and should the wetland flood, as they do from time to time, an entire year's or an entire generation of chicks and eggs can be lost. I believe that has happened here at Comforts before. But yeah, we may leave these flamingos to continue their bathing and head once again to Okakoyo in Namibia once again. Ha ha ha. So back over at Okakoyo, and a whole host of desert adapted ellies has emerged, a bit like magic. It seems like we've just caught the tail end of them, unfortunately. I think they are turning and heading away. But a wonderful pleasure to at least catch a glimpse of these very shy desert residents, of which, as I mentioned earlier, there are probably fewer than 2,000 here in Etosha. This is a nice mixed group. I see a couple of big bulls, but there are also a whole load of cows and young calves as well. Again, unbelievable to imagine that some of these youngsters are having to walk and follow their mothers on a 120-mile round trip every single day. If that's hard work for a big adult, you can imagine the strain that must be put on those little calves. But it's got to be done. They have to drink. Yeah, this is a huge group. I think it is probably the same actual herd that we do view from time to time here. It always seems to be a group of about 30 or 40. And again, navigation through this environment is usually all based on the memory of one very large lead female, a matriarch, and certainly the oldest, most experienced cow in this group. Incredible to think that lessons about life in this environment were passed down to her from her mother and the mother before that and before that and before that. Literally, basically, back to the beginning of elephants. It's a shared system of knowledge and experience passed down through generations. And many of these young calves will currently be learning lessons about life in this arid landscape, and that they will one day need and certainly will one day put into practice to keep their own families alive. They are amazing animals. You'll also notice that they do tend to avoid these rocks. They will, wherever possible, walk on pathways between these sharp, pointy objects. Surprisingly, for animals that have fairly leathery skin, they've actually got very sensitive feet. And so wherever possible, they try and walk on nice, soft surfaces. And in terms of the management of these reserves, if ever you need to keep elephants away from something, a pump or perhaps some solar panels or something like that, the easiest thing to do is just to pile rocks around it. You obviously have to make the pile quite wide though. But yeah, put down some rocks and the ellies stay away. They actually look like they're kind of coming back. I wonder if something didn't spook them. As we came live here, it looked like they were just finishing up. They were certainly moving in the wrong direction, but they're all coming back. I wonder if the big lone bull that we saw here 40 minutes or so ago isn't mingled in with this group now. Amazing how occasionally they all sort of suddenly stop moving. I mentioned in an earlier segment, a lot of elephant communication is at a frequency far below our range of hearing. So I think very often, once they stop like that, and often you see them stopped with their ears extended, and occasionally even the trunk resting on the ground, they're perhaps trying to get an improved listen at another elephant speaking many, many miles away. Perhaps sharing information on a place where rain has fallen, where grass is growing, and they'll rely on information like that to find food and to find other sources of water. Alana asks, at what age do elephants start fighting each other? So, Alana, we certainly see roughhousing behavior amongst young calves from the get-go. There's lots of pushing and shoving. But yeah, male elephants hit puberty similarly to humans, somewhere between 13 and perhaps as late as 18 years of age. So yeah, the real fighting kind of starts around then. That's when the testosterone comes into effect. They become much more hormonal, quite a bit more confrontational, but proper serious battles between adult males that could be fatal probably only happen when that elephant is over about 30 years of age. The majority of battles are over before they've even begun. I think bulls can establish, even at a distance, who's the bigger, stronger man based on their size and through a bit of body language. But if bulls are evenly matched and both of them are feeling a bit musty, feeling a bit confrontational, they can certainly kill one another. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what happened there. These ellies have all just bunched up and they are moving off once again. So perhaps we were right the first time. They must have drunk just before we came live. But a very special scene. Not too many places in the world where you can see a group of 35, 40 odd elephants all out in the open all together like this. Very special. That unusual looking antelope right at the water's edge is, after all, a blue wildebeest, the most common wildebeest species found in southern Africa, and certainly perhaps a slightly unusual looking thing. Certainly a very odd mix of characteristics, all of that long, stringy mane hair, that sort of horse-like tail, buffalo-type horns, long skinny legs. There's a legend in Africa that actually says the wildebeest was the final animal constructed by the gods, and it was constructed from a couple of leftover parts, hence its unusual appearance. I've also heard it said that they are in the ugly five, but I don't think they're too bad. Pretty handsome looking in their own light. Apologies for a little bit of sort of wiggle on that lens. It does seem to be something that happens here when we do zoom in. couple more plains zebra once again, and the odd springbok here or there as well. I think that bird in the background, the quality of my monitor really isn't that great. It might be something like a secretary bird, or equally even a Corey bustard, hopefully as it comes out. Yeah, I think it's a Corey bustard. Heaviest flying bird in Africa. LG7 asks, Liam, do we know how far away elephants can communicate? We certainly do, LG7. So I believe it's at least 35 kilometers, but possibly even a little bit more. As our scientific abilities improve with advancements in technology, we may even learn that it's quite a bit further than that. Yeah, so certainly some pretty serious long-range communication, a characteristic that they share with other great mammals, other big, intelligent, emotional species like many of the whales, which we know can chat at even thousands of miles in the ocean. Yeah, I think because the resistance of water is quite different to the resistance of air or certainly earth, sound travels quite a lot easier under the water for things like the big cetaceans, the whales. Kia asks, how much power does the leader of a zebra harem really have? Kia, a good question. So, yeah, I guess the question is, who exactly is the leader in a zebra harem? Because most of the decisions day to day, and certainly the decisions as to where the group should travel, where they should be grazing, where they should be coming down to the water, those decisions are actually made by an adult female. The lead mare, known as the path. The stallion, who is the dominant presence in the family, is the protector. He defends the family from other groups of zebra. So yeah, I guess the physical power lies with that adult male, but the real important power in the day-to-day decisions, check out that dust devil, is due to the female, a leading lady. Very hot, dry, dusty conditions here at Okakoya. I've just seen that oh, there's a big elephant. I reckon this was our bull from earlier. He possibly picked up on some information about those females, and he's now in hot pursuit. Certainly it's the bull with the very short tail. Now this could be the reason that herd turned very suddenly and headed off in the opposite direction. Hearing him reply to some of their communications, if they're not receptive to his advances, they may want to try and get away from him. It's highly possible that no cows are available for mating, and they just don't really fancy spending any time with this big boisterous bull. Darkmane Lover says, thank you, Liam, for hosting the Live at the Waterholes show. I know you will be very busy with your dream job / career working as a pilot conservationist. Hope to see you again. Best wishes to you in all that you do. Thanks very much, Darkmane Lover. That's extremely kind of you. And yeah, what a pleasure it's been to host a couple of Live at the Waterholes shows in recent weeks. This will be the last one for me for a little while. I've got some stuff on the go, but I hope to be coming to you live in some way, shape, form or another here at either Wild Earth or Live at the Waterhole in the future somewhere. But yeah, certainly as we wrap up on the afternoon's show, hosting view across a very varied African landscape it has been. And yeah, while things have been slightly quiet in some respects, we've also seen some very interesting things and at least a bit of a variety. Ever Live at the Waterhole will be back with you same time tomorrow, other Wild Earth and Live at the Waterhole lists. So be sure to check in same time for your daily dose of waterside activity. One thing's for sure, it's never ever a dull day. Yeah, and there is beauty in all of this natural biodiversity. Beauty in all living things. You've just got to know how and where to look. But anyway, from the greater Africa Wild Earth team, all of the unseen men and women behind the scenes making the magic happen, as well as directors Tulu in the first half and Tadiwa in the second half, as well as myself, naturalist Liam Burrow. It's been a phenomenal pleasure once again. I hope wherever you're out there, you're having a nice Mother's Day. Look after your mums. Enjoy your Sunday, and hopefully we will chat to you again sometime soon. But all the best, and goodbye for now.
Well, a very good afternoon to everybody, and once again, a happy Mother's Day to all the wonderful mothers out there. And I'm hoping you are getting spoiled by all the kids and you are having a fantastic day. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cedric, and behind the camera with me, we've got Muscles and Paul, and we are coming live here from Juma Private Game Reserve in the northern Sabi Sands. Well, in the next half an hour, what we are going to discuss is what's been happening over the last